They didn't knock. They didn't call. They didn't even warn me. They waited until the coldest morning of the year, and then they took everything. If you've ever believed an HOA can't touch land this big, this old, this sacred, stay with me. Because I believe that too. And I was wrong. At 4:52 a.m., I was standing in frost-soaked dirt, watching my cattle breathe steam into the dark, when I saw the paper nailed to my gate. One sheet. One lie. One foreclosure notice claiming my family's 3,500-acre ranch now belonged to the Sunset Meadows Homeowners Association. Not because I missed payments. Not because I broke rules. But because of emergency fees that never existed. That was the moment grief turned into something colder. My name is Rex Thornfield. I'm 58 years old. A widower. And for 4 decades I made my living dismantling illegal property grabs for other people. I just never imagined I'd become my own case file. This land isn't an asset. It's a bloodline. My grandfather, Ezra Thornfield, bought this high desert in 1952 when nobody wanted it. Sagebrush. Snakes. No water. No roads. He carved it open with borrowed equipment, and hands cracked so deep they bled into the soil. My father expanded it. I grew up on it. Learned how to read clouds, cattle, and men who lie through their teeth. And now, according to a judge who never stepped foot here, it was sold at auction for $50,000. $50,000. To the HOA president's brother-in-law. That's when the second shock hit. Because this wasn't random. It was surgical. Sunset Meadows Estates wasn't supposed to be my problem. Back in 2019, a California developer bought land along my eastern fence line and packed it with beige mansions and red-tiled roofs that looked airlifted from Scottsdale. Retirees with time, money, and a deep belief that rules exist to protect them, not bind them. They formed an HOA. And like all HOAs, it didn't take long for the wrong person to grab the gavel. Her name was Vivian Blackwood. First time I met her, she stood at my gate like she owned the horizon. White blazer. Clipboard pressed to her chest. Smile sharpened by entitlement. She spoke about community standards, while my cattle grazed behind her, unimpressed. She wanted access roads. Easements. Water rights. I said no. And HOA people don't hear. No. They hear. Not yet. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't know, was that while I was burying my wife, selling my law practice, and trying to survive the silence in that big ranch house, Vivian was building a paper trail. Fines I never received. Votes I never attended. Fees approved in meetings scheduled at times designed to exclude me. All legal looking. All fraudulent. And now, according to the county recorder, my family's ranch was no longer mine. Here's the part they didn't factor in. I didn't panic. I didn't beg. I didn't call a lawyer. I poured coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled out the one thing they never bothered to check. Every HOA rulebook. Every lien statute. Every foreclosure procedure. Because when an HOA breaks the law, they don't just make a mistake. They open a door. And I was about to walk through it with a filing stack thick enough to burn their entire neighborhood to the ground, legally. But before I could strike back, Vivian made her next move. And that one crossed a line even I didn't expect. Here's what people don't understand about HOAs. They don't start with force. They start with pressure. 2 days after the auction, Vivian Blackwood showed up again. Same blazer. Same clipboard. Different smile. This one was satisfied. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She congratulated herself. Mr. Thornfield, she said, standing on land she technically didn't own yet, Sunset Meadows has decided to be flexible. If you vacate peacefully, we're willing to let you lease back the main house for 12 months. Lease. Back. My own home. I asked her one question. Just one. Show me the ledger. She blinked. Just for half a second. Then she handed me a binder thicker than most murder cases I'd tried. Pages and pages of alleged violations. Gate maintenance fees. Road access assessments. Environmental compliance penalties. All retroactive. All approved during HOA board meetings I was never notified about. On paper, it looked airtight. In reality, it was a crime scene. Dates didn't line up. Signatures repeated with identical ink pressure. One emergency meeting allegedly happened while half the board was on a cruise. I know because one of them bragged about it at the feed store. Vivian watched my eyes scan the pages. She mistook silence for surrender. That was her second mistake. Because the moment she said, "If you don't cooperate, we'll begin removal of livestock within 30 days," something in me snapped into place. You don't threaten a rancher's cattle. And you definitely don't threaten a retired property attorney with eviction timelines you pulled from thin air. Still, I played the part. I sighed. Slumped my shoulders. Let my voice crack just enough. I lost my wife last year. I told her. I don't have the fight in me. She nodded. Patted my arm like she was comforting a child. And then she left. What she didn't see was me locking the door, sitting back down, and smiling for the first time in months. Because now I had motive, evidence, and something even more valuable. Jurisdiction. See, Sunset Meadows HOA made one fatal assumption. They assumed their authority stopped at their fence line. It didn't. When they claimed my ranch through foreclosure, they also claimed responsibility for it. Taxes. Environmental compliance. Water rights. Grazing permits. Access roads. Shared infrastructure. And HOAs are terrible at details. By that night, I had mapped every single procedural violation they committed. Improper notice. Invalid quorum. Conflict of interest at auction. Non-arm's length sale. Failure to record beneficiary disclosures. But the real gem? They used the HOA's master insurance policy as justification for the emergency fees. A policy that, according to state law, didn't legally cover my land. Meaning the entire foreclosure was void. Meaning the auction sale was void. Meaning the title transfer was void. Meaning, legally speaking, the HOA president's brother-in-law had just accepted stolen property. But I didn't rush to court. No. Courts move slow. And I needed leverage that moved fast. So instead, I filed something much quieter. Something most people never notice until it's too late. A notice of irregular foreclosure and intent to enforce reciprocal remedies. Translated into normal English? If you illegally foreclose on me, I can legally foreclose on you. One by one. Under the same rules you abused. I sent certified copies to every HOA board member's home. I made sure their spouses signed for them. And then I waited. Because panic spreads faster than truth. The next morning, my phone started ringing. And the first voicemail told me everything I needed to know. Rex, this is Mark from the board. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh, Mark. This was just getting started. But before I could make my next move, Vivian did something desperate. Something loud. Something public. And once she did that, there was no walking it back. Vivian Blackwood didn't call me. She didn't text. She didn't negotiate. She went straight to the county. By noon, a notice hit the local records office claiming Sunset Meadows HOA was initiating expedited possession enforcement due to an uncooperative former landholder. That's legal-sounding language for one thing only. They were coming for my cattle. If that happened, I wouldn't just lose money. I'd lose permits, contracts, and 3 generations of bloodline breeding. Once livestock is seized, even illegally, it takes years to unwind the damage. That's when I stopped playing defense. At 1:17 p.m., I filed 7 motions across 3 agencies. Not lawsuits. Triggers. First, a quiet ethics complaint against the HOA's retained attorney for certifying a foreclosure without verifying jurisdiction. That alone froze all HOA legal actions. Second, a formal challenge to Sunset Meadows HOA charter expansion. Because when they updated, Their bylaws 2 years earlier, they illegally included my parcel without my consent. That invalidated every vote they ever took concerning my land. Third, and this one mattered, I recorded a lease pendens against every single Sunset Meadows property. If you're not familiar with the term, here's what it means in plain English. It tells the world. These properties are involved in active legal dispute. Banks see it and stop lending. Buyers see it and run. Title companies refuse to insure. Within hours, the HOA's entire neighborhood became financially radioactive. I was sitting at my kitchen table when the first sheriff's deputy showed up, not to evict me, but to verify filings. He recognized my name. Turned out his sister lost her house to an HOA over fabricated fines 5 years earlier. He tipped his hat and said, "Looks like you've got this handled." Then the emails started. One homeowner accused the board of lying. Another demanded emergency meetings. A third threatened to sue Vivian personally. By sunset, Zillow listings vanished. By midnight, 2 pending home sales collapsed. And that's when I finally heard from Vivian. She stormed onto the ranch with 2 board members in tow, fury radiating off her like heat from asphalt. "You can't do this," she snapped. "You're holding an entire community hostage." I looked past her, at the cattle grazing peacefully, and said calmly, "No. You did that when you stole my land?" She threatened defamation, harassment, abusive process. I smiled again. Because every threat she made in front of witnesses. On land she falsely claimed to own. I handed her a folder. Inside were draft foreclosure notices. Each one addressed to a different HOA board member. Same language they used on me. Same accelerated timelines. Same manufactured fees. Perfectly legal. "You see," I told her, "HOA law has a wonderful little symmetry. You set the rules. You just never thought they'd be used against you." That's when the color drained from her face. Because she understood something the homeowners didn't yet. This wasn't about my ranch anymore. It was about survival. But before I could file the first foreclosure, Vivian pulled her final card. She called an emergency HOA vote. A vote designed to erase me completely. And if it passed, everything I'd built would vanish overnight. The emergency HOA vote was scheduled for 6 a.m. That alone told me everything. Most of Sunset Meadows was retired couples. Slow mornings. Late coffee. Vivian chose that hour for one reason: control. She needed bodies that would vote first and ask questions later. The agenda was simple on paper: ratification of prior enforcement actions and indemnification of board decisions. Translated? A retroactive immunity shield. If it passed, every illegal move they made against me would be approved by the membership. Dirty, but sometimes effective. Sometimes. I arrived early. Parked my truck outside the clubhouse and watched lights flick on inside. People shuffled in, half awake, confused. They didn't know their mortgages were frozen. They didn't know their home values were collapsing. Vivian stood at the front like a general. Calm. Confident. She spoke about protecting the community from external threats. That was me. When she opened the floor for discussion, she expected silence. Instead, she got me. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I asked questions. "Does everyone here know their homes are currently under a lease pendens?" Murmurs. "Does everyone know 2 sales fell through last night because of it?" More murmurs. "Does everyone know why?" Vivian tried to interrupt. I kept going. I projected documents on the screen. Meeting notices sent after deadlines. Quorum counts that didn't add up. The auction deed showing the buyer's last name matched Vivian's emergency contact. That's when the room turned. One man stood up shaking. "You told us this was routine." A woman near the back asked, "Why didn't you tell us our houses were at risk?" Vivian lost control in real time. She tried to call the vote anyway. Too late. Under HOA bylaws, ones she herself enforced, any meeting with material financial exposure required full disclosure before a vote. They hadn't disclosed anything. The vote was invalid. And worse for her, they recorded it. By 9:30 a.m., 3 board members resigned. By noon, the HOA's attorney withdrew. By evening, Vivian Blackwood stood alone. That's when I filed the first foreclosure. Not against the HOA. Against Vivian personally. Her home sat on a premium lot overlooking the valley. Purchased using HOA-backed financing. Subject to the same fee structure she weaponized against me. The notice was taped to her door. Neighbors watched. Phones recorded. And suddenly, the woman who ruled by paperwork learned what it felt like to be powerless. But I wasn't finished. Because HOA law has one more beautiful feature. Joint liability. Every board member who voted for the illegal foreclosure? Personally exposed. And by the end of the week, 5 more notices went out. Same language. Same deadlines. Same icy professionalism. Now the neighborhood was in open revolt. People weren't asking if Vivian lied anymore. They were asking who was next. And when panic sets in, truth comes out fast. That's when my phone rang with a blocked number. And the voice on the other end said something I never expected. "Rex, this is the judge." I stepped outside before answering. Cold air. Open sky. The same land they tried to erase. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. His voice was low. Controlled. Not angry, but cautious. "I've been reviewing a foreclosure that crossed my docket last week. The Thornfield Ranch matter." I didn't speak. "When I approved that order," he continued, "I was presented with certified representations that are now in question." That's judge language for someone lied to me. He asked if I had documentation. I told him I had everything. Within an hour, an emergency stay was issued on all actions related to my ranch. The auction sale was frozen. The brother-in-law's title was suspended. And most importantly, the foreclosure was flagged for judicial review. But the judge wasn't calling to save me. He was calling to warn them. Because when courts discover they've been used as tools in a fraudulent scheme, they don't correct quietly. They make examples. By that afternoon, subpoenas were issued. Bank records. HOA communications. Email chains Vivian assumed were private. Turns out, HOA servers don't enjoy attorney-client privilege when crimes are involved. The fallout was immediate. One board member flipped first. Sent me a late-night email filled with apologies and attachments. Another showed up at my gate, eyes hollow, asking what it would take to make this stop. I told him the truth. I want my ranch back. Clean title. Public correction. And accountability. He nodded like a man walking to the gallows. Meanwhile, Sunset Meadows became a financial ghost town. Appraisals dropped. Insurance carriers issued reservations of coverage. One lender called in a loan entirely. And Vivian? She tried to spin it. Local Facebook groups lit up with her version of events. Claimed I was a bitter widower abusing the system. That I was trying to destroy a community. That post lasted 12 minutes. Then someone uploaded the auction deed. Then the fee ledger. Then the recorded HOA meeting. By midnight, comments turned feral. She deleted her account. The next morning, I walked my land with a surveyor and a sheriff's deputy. Stakes went back in. Boundaries reaffirmed. The ranch was mine again, not just emotionally, but legally. But here's the thing about revenge. It's not about the moment you win. It's about what you choose to do with the power after. I could have stopped there. Taken my land back and let the HOA collapse under its own corruption. Instead, I finished what they started. Because the law didn't just allow me to reverse their actions. It allowed me to complete them. Legally. One final filing. One final symmetry. And by the time the sun set the next day, every single HOA member understood the lesson. But the final twist? It didn't end in court. It ended in keys. Keys started appearing on my kitchen table before the ink even dried. Not all at once. One by one. First was Mark, The same board member who left the shaky voicemail. He arrived just after sunrise, hands trembling, eyes red. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He placed his house keys down like an offering. "I voted because Vivian told us we had no choice," he said. "Please." I slid the foreclosure notice toward him. "I didn't have a choice either." Here's what most people don't know about HOAs. When foreclosure procedures are abused, any affected party can enforce reciprocal remedies to restore equity. The law assumes symmetry. If you destroy someone using the rules, you must be willing to live under those same rules. Vivian never was. Within 72 hours, 5 homes entered technical default, not because owners missed payments, but because lenders froze accounts under legal uncertainty. That triggered HOA clauses. Clauses Vivian herself added years earlier to streamline enforcement. The irony was surgical. People who once waved at me from behind privacy walls were now standing in my driveway, realizing how fragile paper ownership really is. But I didn't evict families. I didn't throw anyone out. I offered settlements, clean exits, fee reversals, public affidavits correcting the record. Every homeowner who signed one helped dismantle the HOA's false narrative brick by brick. Every homeowner except one. Vivian Blackwood. She refused everything. Claimed persecution. Claimed sexism. Claimed abuse of power. She filed motions so sloppy they read like panic attacks. Judges denied them without hearings. Then came the final notice. Her mortgage was cross-collateralized with HOA-backed funds. When those funds were frozen, the bank moved fast. The day movers arrived, the neighborhood watched in silence. No speeches. No clipboard. No blazer. Just a woman loading her life into boxes while the valley she tried to conquer stared back, unmoved. That night, I walked the fence line alone. Stars overhead. Cattle settled. Wind moving through sagebrush like breath. The ranch was quiet again. But there was still one loose end. Because stories like this don't stay local. Emails started pouring in. People from other states. Other HOAs. Same playbook. Same abuse. Same fear. They didn't ask for revenge. They asked for help. And that's when I realized, this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. 3 months later, the sign went up at the edge of my ranch. Not a warning. Not a threat. A promise. It read, Thornfield Property Rights Clinic, HOA Disputes Welcome. I didn't reopen my old law firm. I didn't want skyscrapers or billboards or clients who thought money made them invincible. I wanted people like me. Widows. Veterans. Retirees. Families drowning in fines they never agreed to. Folks who thought an HOA was just about lawns and paint colors, until it wasn't. Every case followed the same rule. No illegal revenge. No shortcuts. Just perfect symmetry. We didn't destroy HOAs. We forced them to obey the laws they used to terrorize others. Sunset Meadows didn't survive the year. Without legal cover, insurance, or lender trust, it dissolved quietly. Homes became just homes again. No boards. No clipboards. No manufactured emergencies. As for Vivian, she tried to reinvent herself online. Consulting. Coaching. Leadership. But paper trails don't forget. Every time she applied for a position involving fiduciary responsibility, the same background flags appeared. Some reputations can't be landscaped over. On the ranch, life slowed back to the rhythm Ezra taught my father, and my father taught me. Sunrises. Fences. Calves finding their legs. Sometimes I sit on the porch at dusk and imagine Sarah beside me, teasing me for turning grief into a war. She'd be proud, I think, not because I won, but because I protected what mattered. This land was never just dirt and deeds. It was memory, legacy, and proof that power doesn't belong to bullies with clipboards. It belongs to those who understand the rules and refuse to let them be twisted. So if you're watching this because an HOA pushed you too far, hear me clearly. Document everything. Don't panic. And never assume they know the law better than you. Because sometimes, the quiet man at the fence line is the most dangerous one of all.